This is Tailored End User Experience in Power BI, presented by Scott Fairbanks. Today, Scott's going to talk to us a little bit about tips for designing a consumable dashboard that's customized and governed for business users. I'm Caroline Wright. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company real quick, and then I'm going to pass it over to Scott. So we're CCG Analytics. We provide analytics solutions and services to companies across North America. We provide anything from data management, analytics and self-service, BI, and also strategy around a lot of the changing technologies in our industries today. I'm now going to pass it over to Scott to introduce himself and get into the content.
All right, thanks, Caroline. So first, just to set the expectations for today's webinar, here's the agenda. So first, I'll talk a little bit about myself, and we'll go over Power BI in general before we get into some details about some tips and tricks for visualizations. Specifically, I'm trying to talk about formatting and the way that objects interact with each other. Also, some row-level security, which is a great way to deploy these types of solutions so that people see the right data at the right time. We'll discuss publishing in workspaces and apps is really becoming more popular with Power BI deployments. It just makes it a lot easier for people to know where to go to get their dashboard. So let me get into a little bit about me. I've been doing data and analytics for a while now. So I started using a different tool, IBM Cognos, and it was back when it was a client-side Cognos Impromptu. It was a long time ago. It's come a long way since then. I joined CCG in 2013, and I was still doing some IBM Cognos at first. Then really Tableau started gaining some popularity, and we started to see a lot of interest in that. Really along the same lines as Power BI. It's people want to build their own dashboard and do their own data exploration. But really within the last year, Microsoft became the focus. It really is getting hot, and Power BI is gaining a lot of market share. And what's interesting to me is to always do that contrast and comparison of the different tools, who likes what and why. There's a lot of options out there, so that's kind of what I like to stay sharp in. So this presentation it's about the dashboard and customizing it for end user experience. So some of the topics are entry level Power BI things. So I hope it'll be helpful, and also some of them lean into more advanced techniques and tricks, and hopefully everybody of different experience levels can get something out of this presentation. So before we get into that, so Microsoft, you can see at the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant here, they really gained a lot of ground recently, and they're definitely a leader. It's just really powerful to see them up there. They've been a leader for 11 years, but now really seeing them kind of break out of the pack with Microsoft and Tableau being at the top. It's really, again, it's mostly because of that end user experience that people really love to see. So Power BI Desktop. Really, it's all about the intuitive report authoring, and you can make your own dashboard, you can upload an Excel sheet, or you can connect to a database. It's really user-friendly. You don't have to do a lot of programming, so it's not like some of the other tools. It's not a very technologically advanced entry point. Anybody can start using it right away. There is some powerful data prep and data modeling that you can do within Power BI Desktop. And once you do that, you can really just start to drag and drop, and you can move things around, and the objects interact with each other automatically. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. But really, it's all about data discovery and kind of discovering patterns, on that one screen. And the visualizations are just very interactive, and you'll see, you can really get a lot of useful insight. So just a quick note, there are separate versions of Power BI Desktop, whether you're talking about on-premise or the cloud. So we'll get into a little bit more of that. Those are the two offerings. So a lot of people are going to the cloud these days. That's really where Microsoft wants you to go. They update things fast. They're doing releases every month, if not more. And there's still some places that require the on-premises version. But either way, whichever one you choose, they both really are aiming to provide developers and end users with a similar experience. So they really have the same look and feel. It's, in this case, cloud versus on-premise. It's really more about the environment or the place where you're trying to install it. The cloud is definitely the more flexible, powerful way to go. Okay, so just a typical dashboard flow, and especially in the context of this type of presentation. So first, you use Power BI Desktop to do the development, and that's really where you're, connected to the data source, and you're building your charts, and you're making the dashboard look nice. Once you're ready to share it, then you publish it, and in the cloud, it's called Power BI Service. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So once you publish it, that's when other people in your organization can access it. In this case, we're going to deploy an app. So we're going to deploy an application to the Power BI service, and we'll talk more about that. But basically, what an app is in this context is a collection of Power BI reports. It's a great way to put different reports together in one place so that the user, all they have to know is the one link, and they kind of have like a nice little landing page, a nice collection of multiple reports together. And that's how they can get what they need to get. So that's on the right side, you can see the arrow pointing to the app. That's where the users are going to consume the app. And they don't have to worry about all the different report names or all the different data sources or all the complexities that you're managing. It's nice and tucked in behind the application. So before we get too far into the app development and the dashboard development, I just wanted to show this slide because I know there's a lot going on, but this is really the ideal cloud architecture that this is really unlimited potential. I mean, if you were to set this up at an organization, this is kind of what we're talking to a lot of clients about now, is you can get all your data sources on the left, whether it's cloud or on-premises data. You can pull it in, including, unstructured data and pictures and blob storage. That's really getting popular these days too. Using Azure Data Factory, you do your ETL and you move the data around to where it needs to go. You can put it in a couple different objects, one being Azure SQL database, and that's really, where the data will reside, so that you could then, going one more step over, you could build an Azure Analysis Services model off of your data, and that's the semantic layer. That's the capability to drag and drop and create dashboards, and you publish that so that the Power BI developer can connect to it. And all of that is hooked up nicely thanks to Microsoft to the different Active Directory or whatever type of authentication that you need, and that's how your organization can log in to really get to all of this BI content. And then developers and users really just, on the right side, you can see they just connect into this environment. So with this type of setup, if once you have the Azure subscription and you have all the different pieces connected, it's really great, and you can do a lot of powerful things. Okay, so one thing to note here is there are two different versions of the Power BI pricing. So you could do Power BI desktop dashboard development for free. If you want to download Power BI and just try it out, or if it's just you and you just want to hook up to a database, you can give it a shot for free right now. The biggest difference between that and the next level up is it's $10 a month, so still pretty low price point compared to a lot of other tools out there. What you get with the $10 a month is mainly these pieces here, which is the collaboration. So I want to publish a report or a dashboard and I want other people to see it too. That requires Power BI Pro. And that includes the apps and the app workspaces, which we're going to get into more detail. Okay, so visualizations. This is really what Power BI is all about. It's making that, tell the right story, highlight trends, and get those insights out of your data. A lot of these objects in this little example could be connected, where you click on one piece of a donut chart and all the bar charts beneath it get updated. It's really nice. So we're going to see some of that interactivity as we go. But it's really intuitive, it's actionable, and it's a very user-friendly tool. So as we look at all these default visualizations, this is just what you get out of the box. And you can see there's a lot of different kinds that are available. They have nice little tips on where to drop the pieces, and it really helps you along. Another thing that's nice about Power BI is it's smart. As soon as you drag a measure out there, let's say it's sales amount, and then you drag an attribute, it knows that you want to make a bar chart, or if you bring a date field, that'll probably automatically make a line chart, because it kind of knows how to handle some of your data just out of the box. So one quick plug here for a great book that I read recently. It was, given to me by a colleague, and it really helped me think differently about why I was choosing a certain chart or a style of visualization. And it's storytelling with data. It's just one of those things where as soon as you read it, and then next time you go to to do any more development, or every dashboard or chart that you look at from then on, now you kind of think a little differently about, and it really gives you some good tips. So I would definitely recommend giving it a quick read. It's interesting, and it's just really, it makes some good parallel to movies. So it talks about the plot and the climax and the summary conclusion, and it really goes down well. I would give it a read. Okay, so there are also just some custom visuals out there in Power BI, and some of them are really neat. Like this one, you can see it's like a body part type of analysis that someone shared in the user community. So they're pretty interesting, and sometimes they could be tempting to use. I would just caution. Sometimes they are not always supported. So Microsoft isn't going to support a visualization that a random person developed. I did hear recently, though, that there's a new certified visualization that Microsoft will say that this one works. So keep an eye out. If you're going to look, maybe just make sure you get it from the Microsoft site and check to see if it's certified by Microsoft or not. So another thing that I like to do in a dashboard is to add some images or icons. You could put a banner on a dashboard, and that really spices it up. Maybe a footer picture. Also, what people are doing now, what I'm doing at one of my clients, is they have headshots with their employees, and they want it to show up on a little profile report. And because of all the, like I mentioned in that architecture diagram, the blob storage, you could keep pictures in a database, and Power BI can handle that data type. And you could use row level security or other filters to get the right picture to show up for the right person. So there's a lot of power in that. Instead of just saying Tupperware, you could have a picture of Tupperware. So it definitely says a lot. Also, on the right side, you can see some little basic icons like that home icon or the phone or a student graduate there. Those really help, and they're just a little simple thing. And it's pretty neat that you can just add this stuff in. So I'm giving you guys a little hint here on this one. There's a free website, and I'll just open it up right now and just show you that you could search. This is icons8.com. You can search by a subject, and there's hundreds and hundreds of free icons out there that you can just grab. You can see on the right this graduation cap that I clicked on earlier. It has the PNG set up, so it's transparent other than the lines that you see, and basically it's just really flexible. You'll see I put a couple of them on the dashboard that we're going to show. But even just a little icon here and there to highlight a descriptor can go a long way. So let's open the dashboard. So I created a dashboard for this presentation so that we could use it as a tool to talk about the different design decisions and some of these different technological tips and tricks. Okay, so this data is some fake data that I put together so that we could use it to talk about these tips and tricks. So it's about renting video games or movies, kind of like a Redbox idea. So you can see on the bottom left here, there's some sales, and you can see there's like a list of the different retailers. This is saying that 7-Eleven has 398 different locations where they have one of these rental boxes, and in 2017, this is how many rentals there were, and revenue, and etc. You can see that it's sorted with the highest revenue at the top, and then there's some other metrics on here. I also put in some nice little action buttons, so you could say if you just wanted to look at comedies, you could see what happened is the chart and the list updated, or maybe if I just want to look at video games, I can click on those buttons. You can click on multiple buttons. The buttons are just a nice way to give some interactivity. You can also see that I put two of these icons up here in the top left, just to put a little DVD and video game controller in. I also used them over. You could link to a website, or you could have a phone number. Also, the image at the top it's a banner image, but in a way, it really gives you a lot of flexibility. You can overlay data on top of it. For example, if you had different phone numbers or different websites, that you want to show based on data in a database, you could do that. And really just a little bit of a banner here really helps to, liven things up. So when we look at this page, there's a couple different ways to interact. Like I showed that I clicked on the buttons. Well, you can also click on the list. So you could see for Walmart, let's say, you could see that the chart updated and also this target updated. The reason I put this percentage on here, I wanted to explain the difference between the types of interactions. So in this case, when I clicked Walmart, you could see this chart, it filtered down to just the Walmart results. So you could see that for Walmart, this is how many different, those different parts. But this chart, actually what it did is it's comparing the 75% to target for Walmart to the 88% for everybody together. So it's a neat way to give the user a little bit of interactivity to say, oh, well, compared to that one, I could, compared to everybody, Walmart is a little behind. But if I look at, say, this one, oh, look, they're over targets. They're 115%. So it's kind of a neat way to do that comparison. And we're going to talk about the technical setup of this in a future slide. So there's also some slicers here. So if I just wanted to choose just the convenience store, you can see what happened is now the list filtered down to convenience store. And if I were to click on one, now it's comparing it to all convenience stores. So it's just another way to do a different type of comparison. So it can really give you a lot of flexibility. So another part of this dashboard, this is something that I like to do at different clients, but you can see that this is a summary page, right? If I were to click one of them, let's just pick this one, and I say I want to drill through to the retailer profile. Now this brings me to another page, and now I'm just talking about that one type of retailer, and there are 10 different locations, and I can see some more detailed information just about that. So it's kind of a detail and then drill into the, summary and then drill into the detailed page. So on the top here, this is what I was talking about. This is data that's overlaid, on top of a banner image. So if I were to drill into a different retailer, it would say their name at the top. So here we have some of that same kind of interactivity. If I were to click on one location, you could see that the numbers change. These two charts at the bottom are highlighting the amount of the overall numbers that the selected location takes up. So if I were to say, let me just see how much my top 3 locations, you could see it's a pretty big chunk of each of these sections, the highlighted versus shadowed out. So there's still a lot of good interactivity here. You could click on one, just on-site rentals, and again, that would update, this kind of rental count by type and rating. So again, the objects are just very connected, it's very intuitive, and it kind of gives you a lot of power as a user. So I also put, for navigation purposes, I put a home button up here and I put a back button. So real quick, I'll just demonstrate the difference between the two. So if I click home, it's a bookmark, and what it's going to do is you can see that nothing's selected. I'm back to where I was at the very beginning, right? Well, if I had chosen action and comedy and horror, and then maybe I want to drill through now. So if I were to click back, those buttons are still selected. Whereas if I were to drill through and having those chosen now and I click home, it refreshes the summary page. So that's kind of like another navigation design decision that you'd want to think about. And I'll mention later in the presentation of how to set those two things up. Okay, so now that you saw me click around my dashboard, let's go back to the presentation and we'll just talk about some of those little tricks that I did. So we saw the example. Okay, so the tooltips is a really neat one. You can add things in. So in this screenshot, you can see like tooltip, I highlighted over one of the months, and you can see the online count, or the mobile count, or the on-site count. That's what the chart is based on. But I also put in the gross margin, which is not in the chart at all. But sometimes that's what people want. They want to know some more information that's behind the chart. So in this case, it's really easy to do. You can just drag it another field, just right in here to that tooltips. You click on this chart, and that's one of the options. So that one's a nice add-on that Power BI lets you do very easily. Also, along those lines, so naming convention. So in this case, it's a percentage that Power BI calculated, and it put percent GT gross margin is in there as the label. And me having clicked it, I know that it means grand total, but it's not always that clear to a user. So I wouldn't want it to be named that. They make it really easy. You can just click on that little arrow, and you click rename, and you can name it whatever you want. So this is a really powerful little trick because, as you imagine, once you have a semantic layer and you're building many, many reports, some people might want to name a column one thing and some people might want to name it another thing. You don't always want to have to go back to the semantic layer developer or the database to say, hey, can you rename this field? This technology, this little trick right here kind of lets you name it whatever you want in the report. So you could have one field named, one thing in one report and something else in another report. So it's just a very little thing that kind of helps add some value to the user. So the filter versus highlight thing, this was what I talked about, how either the list could shrink and only show the numbers for what you chose, or it could highlight as a percentage of the whole. So this is an example with those two charts are exactly the same setup. You can see they match. And on the right, there's a retailer type table to use as a filter. So I'll show you what happens. When you go to the format menu in Power BI Desktop, you can click this Edit Interactions button, and it shows you what this chart that I clicked, it shows you the interactions that it's going to cause with the other objects. So in this case, if we look to the top chart, the object will cause highlighting, and that icon looks like a little exploded pie chart. And the bottom one will cause filtering. So those are the two of the three options here. So I'll show you what happens as soon as I click on convenience store here. The one on the top, you can see that it shows you how much of the total bar is from a convenience store. So that's interesting because you can compare it, as a whole. You could say, look, it's like half the bar for December. The bottom chart filtered, and look at what it did. It still looks like full bars, but you could see the y-axis values changed. So it's only showing the convenience store sales. So the reason I put this up here is to show the different capabilities, but really either one of these charts maybe is what you want. I've just tried to show there's a couple different options. So here's another one we kind of mentioned in the quick demo there, but this, a bar chart, when it's a percent, it makes it an automatic bullet chart here. So in this case, when I chose Stater Brothers Supermarket, and it compares it to the overall percent to target, and the highlighted Stater Brothers is 120%, you can see that the bar kind of bursted through the overall number, and it's really easy to see that it's doing better than the group as a whole. So that's just a really neat thing I appreciate as a developer, because I've tried to do this in other tools and it is not that easy. So the fact that Power BI does this right out of the box is pretty great. So there was also a third option for interactions, and that was to disconnect the chart. So in some cases, maybe you don't want every single object on the dashboard to be connected. And when if I were to click this disconnect here, and I were to click something on the retailer type table, then the chart wouldn't change at all. So in some cases, again, maybe that's what you want. Maybe there's a certain metric that is at a different grain, or just two different charts that you always want to show the total over here, but over there you want to filter. So just know that you can also disconnect. The default behavior when you make new objects on the dashboard is everything's connected, but you can change that. Okay, so drill through fields. So this was back to the functionality that you saw when I had the summary page, and then I clicked on one retailer to go to the detailed page. So the way to set that up is really easy. You just go to that second tab there, and you say, I want to bring the retailer into this drill through field down here. And as soon as you do that, on the front page, it lets you click that field and say drill through, and it'll send the retailer that you have chosen through to the drill through. At the same time, in this dashboard, I also hid the second tab because I only wanted the user to be able to choose drill through when they clicked on a specific retailer. I didn't want them to be able to just click the tab. So that's kind of one of those design decisions that you have to think about is how do I want the user to be able to interact? How do I want them to go from the summary page to the drill through page? So that's something to think about. And, in either case, I could see it, depending on how you want it to go, either one makes sense. So again, very flexible. There's a lot of options with Power BI. Okay, the color palettes. So this is something that, sometimes people don't pay enough attention to, and they just kind of pick different colors. And really, again, kind of tying back to that book that I had mentioned earlier, the color palette is a big deal, and you definitely don't want to make it too crazy colored. And, sometimes places have colors that they're used to. I've been in a lot of places where once I asked what colors they prefer, they had a color palette ready to go, and they were happy to share it with me. And Power BI lets you put in whatever colors you want. That being said, I'm not perfect at picking out colors, so I like to rely on this tool, which I'll show you right now. So let me just start this tool over. If you go to this page, coolers.co, and the link is in the file, so you can see it, but you just click generate, and it gives you a 5-color selection here, and when you press spacebar, it just generates 5 more colors that go together. So you can see it's just giving me random colors. Now let's say that I really liked a couple of them. I can click on these 2 and press generate again. And now it keeps those 2, but it gives me other random colors that go well with it. So you can use this tool to basically pick and choose, colors that you like for a color palette. And it's pretty easy to do. You can just take this number and you can copy it right back over into Power BI. So that's what I like to do. Actually, I had a good example of this. You can also use an image. So if I were to click look for image, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers logo ready to go here. And you can use this to get exactly those colors. And then you could take them over to the tool again and look for other ones. Or, you could go back to Power BI with exactly these, and I'll just show you what happens when you can choose which ones you want. Now you're on this screen. It gives you the nice code to bring in. And then what I did was I just redesigned the colors here. Let me start the slideshow again. And here's the quick example of what I just showed you. And then here I just redesigned it so that it would match. So it's very easy to do. It's pretty flexible. And to be honest, when a place has colors that they like or a logo, it's pretty easy to build a dashboard around those colors. Like you could put a logo in the upper left corner, maybe the company logo. And if you just pop those colors into that tool that I just showed you, you could have a nice matching dashboard. And it really looks great compared to the logo that they are already used to, and maybe they already have those colors picked out. But it's just a little thing that adds a lot of value to the end user. Okay, so role level security. Where this comes into play is when you're maybe in an organization like a sales organization or something hierarchical, like in this example, right? Let's say that the district manager was only allowed to see data for their district, and then the divisional manager at the next level, they could see all of their division, and the regional manager can see everything. Well, if you use role level security, you could make one report that really gave all these people their own data at the right level at the right time. What you don't want to do is, have to create 3 different reports that are basically the same, except, one's for district managers, one for divisional, and one for regional. If it works with your data, then, this is a great way to do it. And Power BI makes it pretty easy. So there's a couple, things to consider here. I would definitely try to think of this at the beginning of designing a dashboard. You don't want to build the whole thing and then later on find out, oh, you wanted security? So it's really one of those design decisions that should happen earlier. So here's an example of conceptually kind of what it would look like. So there's a couple different ways to implement it. You can do it in Power BI Desktop, and if that's how you're doing your data modeling within the Power BI Desktop tool itself, then that's where you would do it. You could also do it using SQL Server data tools. That's more like if you had a full-blown semantic layer or a tabular model with Azure Analysis Services. That's where you would do it. But either way, you need to do the same tasks, and it's basically you need to define the role, and you have to use DAX calculations to try to figure out, who to show what at the right time. So at runtime, in this case, you can see there's a sales fact table, then there's a product dimension, location dimension, and time dimension. So just some basic ideas of fact and dimensions. And you'd have to build a security table that goes off somewhere that makes sense. So in this case, like we saw, let's say it's by location. So at runtime, I would make a filter that says, look up my username, and then on the security table, only show my username and my locations, which then in turn would filter the location dimension and the sales so that I could only ever get my own sales. So this is kind of how I think of it, as a little security table snowflaked off of a normal star schema. And this is all runtime things. So as soon as I run the report, it would show my sales, or if my colleague in a different location runs a report, it would show their sales. So I put a link down here to Microsoft article on dynamic row level security. So you could find it this way. It's on Microsoft.com. That's one thing that's great about Microsoft, is they're ready to share. They share a lot of their best practice, and they put a lot of content out there for us. So here's kind of what I just explained. But yeah, rows are limited in the security table. It's only the user running the report. Okay, so workspaces. Workspaces are a place where users can collaborate, and they could save different reports, or I've even seen them used as, I have one workspace for development environment, one for QA, and one for production. And it's a great way to kind of segment who gets access to what. So the one thing to note here, like I mentioned earlier, is you have to have Power BI Pro to use the workspaces, because it's all about permissions, and it syncs with the other Microsoft tools like Teams and other Microsoft applications. But it's a really easy way to invite a colleague to collaborate, and you could share reports, you could look at each other's work, and really just keep each other in the loop. It's also a good way to package up reports together, and you need a workspace in order to create an app. So if I'm going to create a workspace, there's a few choices here. You got to give it a name, and then you could say whether or not members can edit, or if they can just view. So if I was going to release a dashboard to the client, or your customer, your business department, but I only wanted them to be able to look at it and click around and run the prompts, then you'd have to make sure that you choose that second option. Members can only view Power BI content. But if it was more like a workspace, and me and my team are developing and we're working together, and sometimes I do the development, but sometimes my colleague does the development, then you can allow them to edit the content. And then from there, it's really easy to add members. You can just start typing in your colleagues' names, and it looks them up. So you can see I put in a couple of my colleagues here, Greg and Steven, and it automatically, even just as I'm typing Steven and then the first letter of his last name, it's already ready to give me that option to invite him. So then how to get a report into a workspace, it's really easy. So in Power BI, you just click File, and you click Publish, and then you click Publish to Power BI. And once you do that, it pops up with all your available workspaces. So it's very easy. And then as soon as you do that, you can just have someone else, log into that online Power BI service, and they have it as an option now. So it's nice and easy. For apps, that's kind of the next step after the workspace. So once you have a workspace set up, let's say you have 5 reports in there, now you want to create an app. And it's kind of the same lines as a workspace, right? You can just you give it a little description, you give it a name, you could say I want it to start on a certain report page, and then you say who can access it. So I just put myself and Steven and Greg. It'll send them a little email, and then once you do that, really it's kind of a package deal. So what you can see in the upper right here, that this app will publish no dashboards, but it'll publish 2 reports and also 2 data sets. This is important to note, that it's going to publish it as a package deal. So giving someone access to the app lets them see everything that's in there. Now, if you had row level security, that's a different story. They would be limited by that. But just be careful. Whenever you give somebody a data set that's in an app, you need to make sure it's something that they're allowed to see. So this is nice because once you do publish it, now you get one link that you could share with people, and all they would have to know to go to this particular presentation I made in Atlanta, they would just need this one link. They could go in there and they could run any of the reports that are in there. And it shows up on their Power BI service. This is what it would look like if I logged into Power BI service, and under apps, there it is. So it's really easy. I would just click in there and there'd be a couple reports for me to run. So it's a nice way to kind of package it up and share, content with users. Okay, so just some of the things that we mentioned during the presentation, just to kind of recap, like there's a lot of design decisions that you want to take into account as you go. Some of them, earlier than others, but the first thing I usually would ask if I was trying to make a dashboard, I would think, well, is there a need to restrict this set of data, or can everybody see everything there is? That kind of speaks to the security requirements. Does all this data come from one source? Well, if it does, or if it doesn't, either way, you're talking about modeling. You got to think about the future and scalability. If it's many sources, that gets complex, so it kind of depends. Do any of the data visualizations need to span across tabs? And that's kind of talking about layout, maybe a dashboard versus a report, or maybe an app would help you by, making different reports off different data sources, and then you tie them back together with an app. And then really the big one, will this continue to grow in the future? So you got to make sure that it's flexible, or that, you're doing it best practice wise, you're doing the right things, and that it's easy for you or someone else to kind of continue to build and grow in the future. So really that's just about scalability. All right, well, that's the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We appreciate it, and hopefully you learned something from it and took a couple tips away with you. Keep chiming into our website, and keep an eye out for more webinars in the future. All right, thanks again.